If you're afraid of in-person sales, but you love hearing about the income opportunities, then this is going to be for you today, okay? There are all kinds of options beyond all-inclusive and IPS, and that's what we're gonna talk about, okay? So first, we're just gonna dive into the business models we're most familiar with, all right? So the two most common photography business models that you hear about are, number one, all-inclusive, which is also known as shoot and burn, and the second is in-person sales, also known as IPS, okay? All-inclusive has a singular fee that includes the session and digital files. The income earned is limited to the fee that's charged. But IPS, in-person sales, has a session fee and all prints and products are sold separately at a sales session. There's no income ceiling and opportunities for profit are unlimited. Typically, the session fee is a low barrier to entry and the profits are made on the back end. So IPS definitely gets the attention of photographers, but I think what makes them start feeling fearful right off the bat is the idea of a sales session. So we will talk more about that, okay? But as far as in-person sales is concerned, it's been around a long time. In the days of film, there were no digital options, and you'd have your session, the film would be developed, proofs would be made, and clients would return to your studio for preview and then select the chosen photos for purchase. Okay, so many of you might be familiar or remember Olin Mills or JCPenney where this was common. And to this day, JCPenney still offers IPS studio services. Olin Mills started in 1932 and it was bought out in 2011 by another photography company called Lifetouch. But these kinds of services still exist. So these corporate portrait studios, along with private photographers, all had this business model until the dawn of the digital age. And that's where everything changed, okay? With the appearance of digital, people who never thought of having a photography business before discovered that they could work without a studio, without a sales session, and without the ordering of prints. They could just offer the digitals and work from home. And this was super appealing to stay-at-home mothers. And once dominated male industry was turned on its head and the all-inclusive became the dominating business model, okay? So these days, when you hear people mention IPS, the photographers who have never done it before just about have an anxiety attack. In their mind, sales equals sleazy, and they don't want any part of that. And I can understand that to an extent, but the reality is that selling doesn't have to be any kind of sleazy trickery, but that's a whole other entire topic, okay? So if you do feel that way, I encourage you to set that thought aside just for today. All right. So what I would like to ask, because including the fear of being salesy, there's the idea of the studio overhead, the hours involved, and the personal sales session, product delivery, and for some installation of people, in people's homes is very overwhelming because some people even install wall art in people's homes as a service. So all of these things can feel very overwhelming. And even more so for people who have introverted personalities. If you don't know a lot about personality types, I'm sure you've at least heard about introversion and extroversion. Extroverted personality types tend to gain energy being around people. They love to be in social situations. They gain energy from that. They get pumped up by it. Whereas introverts, even though some of us may, because I'm an introvert, some of us may really love to be social and be around people and get out and do things, it expends energy for us. So it's kind of like a bank where you get a certain amount a day, and each time you're out spending more time around people, the more energy that is spent. So IPS can be a little intimidating for personalities like that. But before I dive into this a little further, I want you guys to tell me, because I know a lot of you have mentioned this, but I want to hear from you. What are your fears about in-person sales as far as your understanding of what it is? Or what are the fears and concerns that you've heard other photographers express about in-person sales business models? I'm going to give it a second because I know that there's always a pause between me speaking, you guys hearing. But just off the top of your head, what are some of your fears and concerns about in-person sales? Or is it something that you had not heard about before? Because until the digital age, this was the way things were. Come on, guys, let me hear your comments. What do you think are some of the things that hold people back? Do you think that having a physical studio is a concern? The money behind it, the time spent? Is it the sales session that makes you nervous? Is it talking the money? Millie said, I just realized I'm an introvert. Honestly, my fear is that I don't know much about it, and what I know sounds complicated. Okay, I can definitely understand that. But yes, introversion, you don't have to be a shy person to be introverted. That does oftentimes come with that personality type, but I'm introverted. I just purposely push past my tendency to want to be shy and a wallflower, because I know that that gets in the way of my opportunities in life. So I've learned to push beyond that, but it doesn't matter what I push through, I'm still introverted. And so when I do a wedding, I can't do back to back weddings, like one day and one the next day. I see extroverts doing that all the time. I wish I could do that. I cannot. I have to have a day to physically and mentally decompress and regain my energy. And that's a strong characteristic of an introvert. Jara says, I think people are afraid to ask for the sale. I think that's a very good point. I agree with that. I think that there's a lack of confidence, there's some fear, especially if it's new to you. So that's a good point too. But even with the consideration of all those things, like photographers get wide-eyed when they hear about the possibilities of income with IPS. There's no income ceiling, so the opportunities are absolutely endless. And many who have been working with all-inclusive models find very quickly that to be profitable, their numbers are typically higher than what they see the majority of their peers charging, okay? And that becomes an issue because they start wondering, how are they ever going to be able to charge what they need to when everyone around them is charging so much less? Okay. JR says, if you don't ask, you don't get, and you don't make money. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because even if you're not doing IPS, in-person sales, an all-inclusive model is still asking for a sale. When you present your prices, you still have to have that conversation, whether it's in person or it's through your session experience guide or on your website or all of the above. You're still having that conversation. So you can prepare, and there's so many different ways that you can do these business models, which is why I wanted to talk about this topic today. I was excited that you guys wanted to. But there's so many things that you can put in place to get that fear of confrontation out of your way, because you are standing in the way of your business. You absolutely are. Okay. Now, I want to say that unfortunately, with the evolution of digital and the explosion of hobby photography businesses, came a much lower price point. Okay, much lower price point for services. People weren't evaluating their cost of doing business. Some weren't licensed businesses at all. So these low price points really challenged those who knew their numbers and had a goal of a career business. And those challenges still present themselves to this day. Now, that's not to say that there aren't all-inclusive photographers running successful, profitable businesses. And it's not fair to say that there aren't any challenges with IPS. But the digital age definitely changed the norm for photography businesses and the ways in which we need to market ourselves, okay? The all-inclusive model that most of us are familiar with these days, it's the most common because it's super simple, and it's the business model you see many popular educators doing, like Caitlin James, Amy and Jordan Demos, Hope Taylor, and I mean, I could literally go on and on. And because these popular educators and their because of these popular educators and their business models, some photographers aren't even aware of in-person sales or models that are in between. There just aren't a lot of educators talking about it. But what's talked about even less than the models that are in between, okay? Many photographers are looking to break the income ceiling, all while avoiding tons of time and overhead, and that's where hybrid models come in. And because I know there's some people here who aren't quite familiar with IPS, but they're very familiar with all-inclusive, let me just give you a little synopsis. There is a fee for your session, and that includes the ordering appointments or the sales session, okay? It doesn't include prints, products, or digitals if you do offer them. Some IPS photographers do not even offer digitals. It's purely product. Some do. So that is sold separately. So your income comes in on the back end. Basically what happens is when you have a fee for the session, it's a lower fee point. So it creates a little less, what's the word I want to use? Hesitation when it comes to the total amount that they invest. Because let's say, for example, you put on your website that your session, your all-inclusive, your session is $700. That might make someone a little bit nervous. But if you tell them that your session fee is $150 and your packages start at $275, $299, $300, whatever they may be, that sounds a lot more approachable. Okay. So when you have a low barrier to entry, you have more of an opportunity to make more on the back end, because once they see their photos, then they can see what they're investing in versus paying this big number up front. And that's what I love about IPS and their hybrids, is that there's a low barrier to entry, it's low risk in the minds of the client. And so they're apt to spend more because they have that confidence at the sales session. So that's basically what that is. Now, there's no limit as to what you can make with that. With all-inclusive, you're pretty limited, but there are hybrids of both models, okay? So what I want you to understand before I talk any further about these business models and the hybrids is I want you to know that this is your business. You can create a model that fits you. There is no book or rule that says you have to do one thing or another. And that's the beauty of a hybrid business model. It allows you flexibility. Now, maybe all-inclusive just isn't giving you the income you feel makes sense for the time and effort you're putting in, or maybe you're realizing that our cost of living is going up and up, which it is, and you want to find ways to increase your income beyond your flat rate. And maybe IPS sounds appealing, but your business is young and having a studio is financially feasible at this time, or maybe just the time involved isn't appropriate because you have a young family at home. All right. These scenarios are just a few of many that may be very good reasons to consider a hybrid. All right. So a hybrid photography business model is one that combines some or many of the elements from all-inclusive and IPS. And there are so many ways one can do this. All right. The most popular hybrid I see is from all-inclusive photographers, and it's called the upsell. The upsell is where a fee is charged that includes the session and a particular number of digitals. When the gallery is ready, clients are able to choose the number of images included in their package, but they have the opportunity to purchase additional image or even the entire gallery. Now, I know many of you have heard of this before, okay? This is a super simple way to increase profits with minimal time involved. However, the biggest complaint I hear from photographers with this model is that clients make screenshots of their gallery, posting the pics to social media, but not buying much or anything at all above their original package. Now, some of this may be about what they're charging in the first place. As we all know, that low prices attract bargain hunters who are looking for the cheapest way to get the pictures they want, okay? They're buying the deal versus the value of you and what you have to offer, okay? So to continue this model successfully, you're gonna have to sit down and figure out, what are the appropriate fees I need to be charging in the first place, and maybe get creative with ways to prevent this from happening. Jennifer, let's see. Hey, Jen says, I do not have a studio and don't want to open my home up to clients. So when you say hybrid, you are meaning online. Hybrid literally means a combination of the two systems. But yes, you can do it. You can do a hybrid fully online, which is what I do. And I'm going to talk about that. So yes, there are all kinds of options, but hybrid literally means combining elements of the two. And as to what elements you want to add together to form your own hybrid is totally up to you. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. Now, the hybrid model, that's what we're going to talk about next. The hybrid model that I hear about the least is the one that I personally practice, and it is virtual IPS. Okay. There is no studio, there is no traveling to a client's home for a premiere or sales session, and there's no delivery or installation of wall art. So I want to tell you guys my story of how this ended up happening to me and tell you a little bit more about my business model and why I love it and why I think it's something that I want to share, because it is something that I think would be very appealing to a lot of people. Some of you know that in 2020, I pivoted my art business to photography. I was not new to photography, as I took many years of courses in both high school and college, but I also was not new to business because I had a business on the side as an artist and educator while also working as a dental hygienist. But I was new to the business of photography. I launched my new business right in the middle of the pandemic, and the week that I planned to open my LLC, we went into lockdown. So I held off for a few months and dove into education and running my numbers. I finally filed for my LLC and I was preparing to take my first paying clients, and I set up a mini session. And I felt honestly totally frozen about what to charge. I knew what I wanted to charge and needed to charge, but I knew what other people were charging, and I was so afraid that people would not pay. And I just wasn't known. I hadn't been around long enough for people to just, pay a price. At least that's what I thought. And I was just having analysis paralysis about it. I had gone into my business fully planning on an all-inclusive model, but what others were charging for minis in my area was nothing that would make an actual income. And in fact, it would put me at a loss. It was going to put me at a loss, in a hole, a negative in my bank account. I had lost my job as a dental hygienist after having an accident that required an extended medical leave, and I was not willing or able to charge $50 to $100 for a mini. I wasn't willing to accept the negative bank account balance and try to, take a year to build up to an actual income. I didn't have time for that. It was either go to work for someone else and do this on the side or get it right out of the gate. And I wasn't about to go back to work for someone else. So I did the numbers, I did some research, and I discovered that IPS was alive and well, okay? And some of these photographers even offered digitals with their physical product offers. I didn't even know that they did that, because I was familiar with the old school stuff where, you went and had your photos taken, you came back to the studio and you picked out what photos that you wanted, and they were given to you in print form. Either you went and picked them up at the studio or they came to you and delivered. I didn't even know that there was IPS out there who also included digitals. Now, I will tell you, in the IPS circle, there are some people who will condemn that. They will scream at you that you'd never ever let go of those. Those are your digital negatives, which they are, because that's the source for your income, or your negatives, right? But I don't see a problem with offering digitals, and there's a lot of reasons why that we could go into. I'm going to keep this brief, okay? Also, I realized that with a session fee separate from a package fee, that clients felt less intimidated to book, and they were even willing to spend more because they had the opportunity to see the finished product and invest in what they felt was of value and importance. COVID was also a huge concern for me, as it was for my potential clients, and people wanted to keep their distance as much as possible. Even if I had a studio at that time, there would have been no studio sessions. That would have been closed, okay? Out of COVID, my business model was born, and I created a session experience guide to build value and trust with my clients. They learned of the experience they could have working with me, and my fees and packages were clearly transparent. I didn't need to have an in-person introduction or even a discovery call. I don't know if you guys have heard of those before, but I didn't even have to do those to explain anything, because the guide anticipated their questions and needs, and it addressed them. Have you guys heard of discovery calls before? Do you know what that is? It's where you call a potential client and basically talk up yourself and your business to create value and excitement to encourage someone to book. And as I mentioned before, I am super social and outgoing, but I'm also very introverted. The last thing that I would ever want, that I would ever do as a client, that is, or want, is hop on a call with a service professional. That would make me so uncomfortable. I hate small talk. I hate feeling sold to. I want to know all the info up front. And if at that point I know it's something that I want, then I'll reach out and book. And I know the majority of my clients feel the same. So I didn't, and I still do not do that. Well, Marie says no. But yeah, that's what a discovery call is. You hop on the phone, you tell people about the experience they're going to have, about the business, and basically you're encouraging them to book by instilling value. But I personally feel that that doesn't work for people like me, and I know the majority of my clients feel that same exact way. So I put the experience through my digital communication first, and it works for me. All right. I knew that I wanted to do IPS because I didn't want to lock myself into a set session fee, but I wasn't sure how I was going to do a sales session with COVID. And to be honest, the entire idea of sales freaked me out. But when I was a dental hygienist, I learned that there was a difference between selling something to someone and guiding them to what they need and or are looking for. Okay. I had to educate patients every day as to why their recommended treatment plan mattered. And it's the same in photography. So there's a difference between sales and service. And once I shifted my mindset and got out of my own way, I knew that I'd find a way to do this. So due to COVID, what I did and still do to this day is conduct a virtual premiere and ordering appointment, not a sales session. It's a premiere and ordering appointment, okay? And at this point, we've had multiple points of contact via email, session guides, what to wear guides, client questionnaires, and in person at the session itself. And after you've been in person, you develop a rapport with clients, a sales session is so much less intimidating. With your mindset shift and your client rapport, a sales session is no longer a sales session, it's a service session, okay? I give all of my fees up front, all of my packages up front. So they have agreed to that coming in, and I'm very well aware of that. And I remind myself of that anytime I might get nervous with a upcoming sales session. Okay, it's a service session. They already know what your fees are. My responsibility at that point becomes showing people and guiding them to what it is they're looking for and what they need and want. It's as simple as that. I don't have to convince anybody of anything. Now, do they right away want to buy my top package? Absolutely not. Everyone shoots in the middle. We all know psychologically when you set up your packages, people are going to go in the middle. They don't want to be cheap. They don't want the cheap stuff. And the top package might seem like a little bit too much of a luxury, like a little bit of a splurge. But that middle always feels comfortable. But for quite a while now, I have been selling again and again my top package. It's not because I'm doing anything salesy or slimy and don't have any like specialized tactic. It's a matter of talking to them, finding out what it is that they really need and want, and showing them why their want is a proper investment. That's it. It's not something that makes me uncomfortable. They are fully aware of the products and fees. It's just me helping guide them at that point. And you can set it up for yourself that way too, to take the fear out of it. Okay? In the middle of COVID, as a photographer new in business, I made 5 times and more, in a lot of cases, than what others in my area were charging with my hybrid IPS system. Straight out of the gate, guys. People will pay for what they value. But I do believe that my hybrid method is what has helped me be so successful. My business model is very hands-free. I don't have the overhead of a physical studio. I don't spend countless hours on discovery calls and delivering and installing wall art. The only part of my process that's in person is the actual photo session itself, and I earn a profit for my time. Okay, now there are other variations. This is just a brief, summary of mine. But, you can do, if you're looking for something outside of traditional or all-inclusive IPS, you can make your own hybrid. It doesn't have to be overwhelming or overly complicated. Like with anything, it just takes a little bit of time to decide what you'd like to do a little research, and figure it out from there. I'd love to know from you guys if my simplified virtual sales system is something you'd like to hear more about, like my workflow, my packages, the products I offer, my strategies for profit. I think this is a very unusual system that I'm not really seeing elsewhere, and I'd love to share this with others because it's been so successful for me and it's reduced the time and stress that could be involved with other traditional routes and methods. What my goal was for today was to inspire you through knowledge that nothing is set in stone and that you can conduct your business in a variety of ways. I mean, many IPS photographers, like I mentioned earlier, they don't even offer digitals to this day. And we are in a digital age, and they are successful. Some people offer products and digitals, but don't do any kind of sales session. There are so many ways you can structure your business so you have an opportunity to make the income you need and want in a way that fits your life and needs best. Now, there was a comment from John earlier that I want to address, but before I do that, he had posted it on our event page in the Facebook group. But I want to ask if you guys have any comments or questions at this point. Because John brought up a really good point that I want to address. What John said was, Jen says, yes, I would love to know how you do it. Awesome. Because I really think that I didn't realize that what I was doing, just others were not. and I saw what others were doing, and I just felt like, okay, this isn't working. We're in the middle of COVID. I need to do something else. How can I make this as hands-free as possible? And in developing that, because of COVID, I also found this is as stress-free as possible. And I'm able to increase my income because of it. So it's something that I've been thinking about, like really diving into and sharing with you guys. So I would love to hear your feedback. So thank you for that, Jen. John said, I have to get out of the mentality that I would be holding the images hostage for a fee. I know that my response to a pushy sales pitch is to walk away. If you have to convince me to buy something, then there's something wrong with the product or the price. There is a lot to be said about his comment. Everyone wants to buy, but no one wants to be sold to, especially me. And that's why we need to learn what our clients are looking for, educate them about what we have to offer, and lead them to make the best choices for their wants and their needs. Okay? John's comment is why I don't do discovery calls. If I would be personally turned off by that and feel sold to, and I know for a fact that majority of my clients would too, I will not do that. It works for some people, that's great. But I think especially in a digital age now, it's like if someone calls you, even if you know them, you feel offended. It's like, why didn't you just text? Do you know what I mean? Like, we are so used to communicating digitally. And I think that there are ways that you can express your value without having to have a phone call. Again, that works for some people, but I know for my clients, it would be more of a turn off than a turn on to booking me for their session. Okay. Daniela says, I'm just turning in, but glad to hear about this. Hey girl, you can watch the replay. It'll be up in a little bit, but I'm glad you're here live with us. But with my business model, I never feel like I'm holding any images hostage for a fee, because my session experience fee is literally for the session itself and for the premiere and ordering appointment. I have at this time no minimum ordering requirement. A lot of photographers who have some version of IPS do, but I do not at this time. My clients know exactly what the fees are going in. And just, side note, some photographers with IPS models or hybrids don't give package fees until they've paid their session fee. I do not do that. Because me as a consumer, I would never book something like that. Ever, ever, ever. I don't want to be put in a place where I find out later I can't afford something I signed up for and be embarrassed. Never, ever, ever would I put a client in that position. But those business models do exist. But back to saying, they know what the fees are going in, and they're not obligated to purchase anything but what they love. That eliminates that feeling for me, John. Because they go into this paying what they feel is they paid for my time. And if they want to purchase beyond that, it's completely up to them. That removes any kind of feeling of guilt that I could possibly have. Now, I will say this, however, when it comes to minimum ordering fees, it may be very well something to consider, because with my business model, my income comes from the back end. But at the same time, I feel confident in my work and I've prepped my clients to know what to expect. So I over deliver with my service, so it's not of a concern for me at this time, but I know it can be a concern for others, so that is something you can include in your business model, is a minimum ordering fee. But for me, I think what makes my clients feel safe is knowing when I tell them you only invest in what you love, that is the absolute truth. But as you guys know, because I've talked about this before, my bottom package is priced for profit. So even if they buy the bottom barrel package, I'm okay. I'm okay. I've paid my bills with my business and in my home. There's food on the table. All right. Let's see. Jen says, I think for your client to see everything up front is awesome. Yeah. The only thing when they go to my website, guys, what I have on there is the exact fee for my session experience fee. And then I tell them what my bottom package fee is. And then it states in big and bold what the average client investment is. Okay, so they can see, okay, I don't have all the numbers here because I don't put my a la carte menu there because it's set up strategically for my business, and it won't make sense exactly for the public to see that and other photographers to see that. But I have the session experience fee, and it's not a sitting fee. It is not a creative fee. No one cares about your creativity fee. Don't say that. Take the attention off of you, saying I'm an artist, I'm a creative. Yeah, we know that. That's why they're hiring you. But put the focus on your client. It is a session experience. They're going to have an experience booking with you. They're not, a creative fee or a sitting fee. Get away from that language. Get away from that language. Okay. But I have that on there, the bottom package, and I have the average that they can expect to invest. So they can already add that up and figure out, okay, this is within my budget. I love the work. This sounds awesome. I'd like to know more. Okay. If you're doing all inclusive, then your fees would be all up front right there on your website. So that's basically what I do. I don't like to leave any stone unturned, any question unanswered. So what is not on my page on my website is completely written out into my session experience guide. That is where I go into even further details about what they can expect with the session, down to the number of images that they're on average that they're going to view at their premiere and ordering appointment. Again, I call it a premiere and ordering appointment, not purchase appointment or things like that. Get away from that kind of negative language. But they have all that information. And so when you are confident that they have been educated and they are very well aware of the price point, there is no feeling of guilt or uncomfortability about having a session virtually with a client. So I do, again, my premiere and ordering appointments are completely virtual. I do them online. And they're able to see all of their photos, and we're able to talk about the packages and the a la carte items that I have. And then I help guide them to, I ask them what it is that they're looking for, and I help guide them towards that. It's really not as intimidating as it sounds. It gets easier the more and more that you do it. And I'm telling you guys, when you do that, you've already had a session with them, so you've developed a rapport, you developed a relationship, and you're just continuing to be their guide. When you're taking their photos, you're their guide into showing them how they can represent themselves best in photos. You're the guide that helps them with posing. You're the guide that helps them with locations. Okay? You're still being the guide at their ordering appointment, at their sales session. You're still a guide. You're not a salesperson. All right? But you are conducting a sale. That's the reality of it. But again, you're a guide. It's like when I was a dental hygienist, I didn't feel slimy about telling somebody they needed a crown because they needed a flipping crown. If you don't get a crown, there's going to be a big problem. But people, when they saw the price point, were kind of like, I don't know about this. Can I hold off? Probably shouldn't, because we're going to have an even more expensive problem. So let me explain to you why this would be considered a good investment for you, and then you can decide from there. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Any questions or comments? I love talking about this because I think that we create barriers for ourselves and we don't even realize that we are our own barrier, getting in the way of our own business. It's amazing how we can trip ourselves up, guys. It's amazing. And don't think because I've been doing this now for a couple years and that it's working so well for me that I don't have my moments too. I am not perfect. I just work very, very hard to break the barrier of my faults and my hesitations because I want this bad enough. I don't want to work for somebody else again. I don't. And my why is strong enough that it keeps me going every day.